The UUA reminds us that Unitarian Universalist congregations affirm and promote 7 principles, which we hold as strong values and moral guides. We live out those principles within a living tradition of wisdom and spirituality drawn from sources as diverse as science, poetry, scripture, and personal experience. The third one of those sources, one we are exploring today, is described as wisdom from the world's religions, which inspire us in our ethical and spiritual life. On a personal note, what do I remember from past services on this subject? Not much, not very clearly, which is a good reason to be reviewing these sources every now and then. I do recall the beauty of a sand mandala painted so very patiently by visiting Buddhist monks one June several years ago. On another occasion, our children's religious education leader read from a book about a young boy who would later be called Buddha. But from either experience, I cannot remember a particular principle or quotation that expresses an element of the Buddha religion. Apart from UUCCI, I've had exposure to other cultures. I exchanged letters with a young Hindu student in Nepal in the Answer program. He described a seasonal Hindu festival called Dashain, but did not explain the religious significance of it, just how much fun it was. If for a writing class in IUPUC, I interviewed an adjunct professor from India who told me about his childhood there. His family followed Muslim teachings, but he avoided those lessons by playing outside with friends whenever he could. From my contact with these two, I received a wonderful glimpse of other cultures, but no lasting religious content. I've had little exposure to Middle East and Far Eastern religions. Because of that knowledge gap, I searched this week for quotes of wisdom from Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, Confucianism, and Taoism. Their topics range from education, wealth, behavior, and health to interpersonal relations. I soon noticed similarities in each culture on the topic of how we should regard ourselves. From the Islam Quran, indeed, Allah will not change the condition of a people until they change what is in themselves. From Buddha, what you are is what you have been. What you'll be is what you do now. From the Hindus, you should keep your mind pure, for what a person thinks, he becomes. From Taoism, when you know and respect your inner nature, you know where you belong. From Confucianism, respect yourself and others will respect you. Some of these quotes remind me of fortune cookies and astrological horoscopes. They have that worldly common sense feeling that comes when repetition leads to familiarity. Until now, I didn't know the sources of these ideas, but the ideas themselves were not new to me. My little internet research project helped me learn where those familiar concepts came from. All these philosophies or bits of advice also resonate within the UUCCI value of striving to be our best selves. They speak in a different way to our first principle by acknowledging the inherent worth and dignity of every person, even the person looking back at you in the mirror. Come, join us this morning as we further explore the third source of our Unitarian Universalist principles, wisdom from the world's religions.
Far, far away, in the abode of the great God, Indra, king of heavens, hangs a wondrous, vast net. Now you need to know Indra's net is much bigger than this net. It's infinite. You guys know that from like Buzz Lightyear, infinity and beyond, okay? It goes on in all the directions. And because the net of interconnectedness is infinite, so are all the little jewels that happen on all the little spots where the web comes together. Now, have you wondered maybe what those jewels are for? Or maybe what they represent? Do you have an idea? Yeah, so you're actually onto something. It kind of like those water droplets reminds us of each one of us and plants and animals, all forms of life, and how we're all connected to one another. So I invite you right now for a second, join me to close your eyes and imagine what that magnificent jeweled net looks like, spread across space. And keep your eyes closed and move in close to just one of those dazzling jewels on the net. And you'll notice that that jewel reflects all the other jewels in the net, just as two mirrors that are placed opposite each other reflect the image. Each jewel reflected in the gem you're gazing into reflects all the other jewels, so that it goes on and on and on. Now slowly open your eyes, and I want each of you to know that you are a sparkling jewel in Indra's net, and so is each person around you. And every jewel is connected with all the other jewels in the net. So that has me think about what might happen if the net, so what might happen if the net was damaged? What might happen? Should we see? Oh no. What happens? It breaks and there's a big hole. And it may not happen right away, but what can happen over time is it would all come unraveled and fall apart. But what else can happen? The gems could fall off, right? They're not going to be held. But now, do you know that they can also be repaired? And so if we do something harmful to one another, that's felt by everyone. Everyone suffers and everyone's harmed when we hurt one another. But if we mend and we do little acts of kindness, those can create ripples. Yeah. And then all of those ripples can be felt by love and connection to one another, and they can strengthen each other. So just as we can create that whole, we can also make, now see here, there would be a place for a new jewel and a new jewel, because maybe the person, when they saw this node that it was connected to was harmed, someone might have come along, and now there's a point where there could be a jewel and another jewel and another jewel. And there's ways that we could connect to one another.
That jewel is being
Yep, and see here, there's one missing, so now we could add another jewel there.
And then that jewel here to that.
That's right, that's right. So as we think about our seventh principle and our fourth source, may you be reminded of how we are all connected to one another and how our positive ripples across the infinite can touch every jewel and every person, plant, animal in existence.
The light of this chalice reminds us that it is a symbol of all the world's religions. This small light shines, as do the fires burn, to ward off the darkness and welcome back the sun in the Celtic and Native American faiths, as do the Jewish Shabbat candles and the Christian altar candles, as do the oil lamps of the Hindu Diwali and the candles of Buddhism. And it is a symbol of the light inside each of us, as recognized by Muslims. It is a symbol of the sun and evolution, as studied by humanists. When our chalice is lit, when our chalice is lit, may we be reminded that this light is a symbol that ties us to many faiths, beliefs, traditions, and customs from which we can learn and enrich our lives.
In East Asia, every home has a family altar. Whenever there is an important event in the family, such as the birth of a child, we offer incense and announce the news to our ancestors. If our son is about to go to college, we make an offering and announce that tomorrow our son will leave for college. When we return home after a long trip, the first thing we do is offer incense to our ancestors and announce that we are home. When we practice this way, we feel deeply rooted in the family. I encourage my students of Western origin to do the same. When we respect our blood ancestors and our spiritual ancestors, we feel rooted. If we find ways to cherish and develop our spiritual heritage, we will avoid the kind of alienation that is destroying society, and we will become whole again. We must encourage others, especially young people, to go back to their traditions and rediscover the jewels that are there. Learning to touch deeply the jewels of our own tradition will allow us to understand and appreciate the values of other traditions, and this will benefit everyone. This morning, we are continuing a 6-part series on the sources of Unitarian Universalism. These are the 6 wells from which we gather the waters of meaning for each of us as individuals and for us collectively as a congregation. If you haven't been here the last couple Sundays, we will focus today on the 3rd source, as we've been talking about, and the previous 2 Sundays services are available on our YouTube channel if you want to check those out. The 3rd UU source that has given shape to our living tradition is wisdom from the world's religions, which inspire us in our ethical and spiritual life. For many, this is one of the sources of meaning that maybe originally drew them to a UU congregation. For example, how many of you sort of had an understanding or kind of an appreciation that Unitarian Universalists welcome the wisdom of various world religions? That's somewhere in the awareness. It may be what brought you to a UU congregation the first time. The history and reasons for this are numerous, for how Unitarians became more caring about world religions. Sometimes this was because of international travel and the access to sacred texts from across the world. Sometimes it was due to just a logical extension of our already liberal interpretation of truth and meaning as not possibly being contained in one book or another. But regardless of the events that led us to embracing the world's religions, one thread runs through it all: religious humility. Religious humility is what opens us to the wisdom of the world's religions. It is naming that we do not know it all, understand it all, see it all, and how could we? How could we? As much as technology has made the world feel smaller, more accessible, it is indeed a world that is wide and deep, broad and intricate. It is filled with such cultural and religious diversity that the more we dig, the more we learn, the more we feel like we are just scratching the surface. And this humility, whether we practice it intentionally or not, has at the very least opened the door to religious tolerance and appreciation that has shaped us into who we are today. In fact, the notion of religious tolerance dates back in modern history about 450 years to when a Unitarian king, John Sigismund, declared the Edict of Torda, which is considered one of the first statements of religious toleration in modern history. From the Edict of Torda to the present day, Unitarians, Universalists, and eventually Unitarian Universalists have been curious, open, and increasingly engaging with the wisdom found in our world's religions. As an aside, during my sabbatical, which will happen next winter, I will be visiting the sites where the Edict of Torda was given, which is Torda, a small town in Transylvania, in the Transylvania region of Romania. And that seems fitting, as much of my formation personally has been shaped by the value and wisdom gained by moving across lines of religious difference. Interfaith cooperation and the study of different religious traditions has been a huge influence on the minister I am today. I recall in college studying Buddhism and Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, and Christianity, among others, and recognizing that while there are very distinct elements to each religion, there are some shared ethical commitments among them. In studying these religions, I, in turn, wanted to more deeply understand my own. Even as a lifelong Unitarian Universalist, I knew there was so much I still had to learn. Sometimes we forget that in engaging with someone who is different than you, we don't become that different person. And that fear of perhaps conversion or osmosis, almost like an infection, prevents us from ever wanting to be in relationship with people who are different from ourselves. But interfaith dialogue and multicultural experiences are not about conversion. It's an invitation to mutual transformation. There's a big difference. After going to DePaul University in Chicago, that's with an L, the largest Catholic school in the country, I continued my interfaith study and formation by attending a multicultural, multi-faith seminary on the south side of Chicago, in which I was maybe just one of 3 UUs. By learning about and being in relationship with others of different religions, I came to see more clearly that the wisdom of these various religions have all, at some time or another, been a catalyst to transform our world at its best through love and action for millennia. And at some point, I cannot pinpoint, I came to learn of the Buddhist and Hindu story of Indra's web, which Adrian shared this morning during our Wonderbox time. What I love about this story and the symbolism of a universal web with an infinite number of jewels at each intersection of the webbing is that it is both a story about what the universe is and how the universe changes over time. It is both a story of existence and ethics. It says not only are we bound up in a web with all of life, but that our actions, both good and ill, have an immeasurable impact on the rest of the web. Let's take these one at a time. First, the web itself is an image that we share our sense of with the interdependent web of existence, which is named in our 7th principle. It is a web that does not confine us, oppress us, but rather holds us and liberates us, reminding us that we are not in this alone. but woven instead together with all that is, all that was, and all that will ever be. In our second reading this morning, Thich Nhat Hanh spoke of engaging with the rituals and practices of one's own tradition, and doing so will create a sense of feeling rooted, to feeling rooted and connected to a source, to a resource for life. And he names the unfortunate outcome of what happens when we are not rooted as a human family. He uses the term alienation. We become alien to one another and to life itself when we are not rooted. And the beauty of engaging our own tradition in proximity to others, engaging in theirs, is that in the process we are able to recognize the jewels of existence that are all around us and within us, mirror and window. Held in Indra's web, we remember that we are all members of life itself. The implications of this remembering, which often needs to happen again and again and again, have to do with our ethical and spiritual lives. This is the second part of that source, wisdom from the world's religions, which inspires us in our ethical and spiritual life. We are inspired to lead our lives with an ethical commitment, a deep care shaped by these many diverse religions. How we treat one another and our world is directly related to how we understand one another and the world. That makes sense, I hope. Each religion brings wisdom, shines light onto the sacredness of all existence, and it matters not, let me say this again, it matters not how you arrive at kindness, compassion, service, and love in your life, so long as you find it and you greet it and you be it and you share it and you carry it forward for the next generation. If you resonate with the teachings of Buddhism, wonderful. If you are at greatest peace in nature and the turning of the seasons, wonderful. If you are a humanist or you're a theist, if you're a Jew, a Jew or a Muslim, if you know the depths of Unitarian Universalism, or you are just scratching the surface of what that is, wonderful. For in all of these journeys, we are becoming rooted, connected, and awakened to the simple reality that we need one another. How might we practice remembering this, that we need one another, that we are in this together on the journey, in this web of all existence? If only there was a ritual or a symbol in our own tradition, something that we could engage regularly and remind us of that important commitment. Each Sunday, we have such a symbol. We have such a ritual. It is in the lighting of our chalice in Sunday services. It's in saying the words, taking the time, feeling the beauty of sparking something that then emits warmth and light, flickers of truth and meaning for at least an hour each week. We say these words, we light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning in celebration of the life we share together. The light, this light, although small from our chalice, bathes us in our time together. The common bowl of our shared existence reminds us that we are all looking for truth and meaning in this life. And such a great symbol it is, fire, light, because it is present in so many of our world religions, if not all. Beth Casebolt reminds us of this, which many of you, which may give you more meaning regarding the lighting of our chalice each week or throughout the week, if you have a little chalice or candle at home, or you do here at meetings during the week. She writes, The light of this chalice reminds us that it is a symbol of our world's religions. This small light shines, as do the fires burned, to ward off the darkness and welcome back the sun in the Celtic and Native American faiths, as do the Jewish Shabbat candles and the Christian altar candles, as do the oil lamps of the Hindu Diwali and the candles of Buddhism. And it is a symbol of the light inside each of us, as recognized by Muslims. It is a symbol of the sun and of evolution, as studied by humanists. When our chalice is lit, may we be reminded of that light. And that light is a symbol that ties us to many faiths, beliefs, traditions, and customs from which we can learn and enrich our lives. Friends, may we be reminded that we are bound up together in Indra's web, in this web of all existence. May we come to recognize the beauty and privilege we have to be a part of this interfaith campus with our Hindu and Jewish siblings, with those that practice pagan rituals like next Sunday and Buddhist meditation like 2 Sundays a month. May we recognize the awesomeness of living in such proximity to many of the world's religions, practiced with integrity and care. And may we not mistake the value of this small chalice light. It is here each Sunday, a reminder of who we are and who we are together. May we be rooted, held, and bathed in such a warming light as we feel on this spring morning. May it be so, and amen.